Our chapter begins tonight with 1 Kings chapter 20 and verse 11. The latter part of this chapter and chapter 21 and chapter 22, it really shows what a weak, ineffective, evil, inappropriate, all those good terms about Ahab as king. He was to be pitied, not only because he had married Jezebel, that was bad enough, but he himself was, though a moment or two there seems to be some good things about him, but for the most part he makes blunder after blunder. Now, as we closed our lesson last time, Ben-Hadad had threatened northern Israel, and Ahab had tried to appease him best he could. And finally Ben-Hadad made such demands that you will remember that Ahab said, "Let not him that girdeth on his harness boast him as he that putteth it off." He's simply saying, don't count your chickens before you hatch. And he spoke out rather confidently there. But the Syrians came upon him with great numbers. And a prophet came and he said, "Do you see these great numbers that are coming against you?" And of course he did. And he said, "God's going to deliver you from them." Well, that must have been somewhat of a shock of Ahab, because he and God usually were not on good terms, but God was more interested in Israel than he was Ahab. "God's going to deliver you from Ben-Hadad." And he said, "How?" "Well, with the princes, the nobles, the people that you've got." And he's asking in essence, well, who's going to lead them in that? And the prophet said, "You are." Well, now that must have been a shock to him. But you know, he did lead those people to an astounding victory over the Syrians on this occasion. And he chased them back, but the prophet came to him after that victory and he said, "Now listen, Ahab, you fortify yourself, because in a year's time he's going to come back and attack you again." Well, in a year's time he did come back and attack. But Ben-Hadad wasn't any more successful the second time than he was the first. Ahab won 2 great victories. But after that second victory, when he had Ben-Hadad where he wanted him, when the Syrians had been constant enemies of northern Israel, he could have put them out of business. But he didn't do it. He was peaceful and lenient toward them. He even called Ben-Hadad his brother. Now, I can't figure out how he figured he was a brother of Ben-Hadad unless he was thinking he hid him back there at Noah somewhere. But he sure wasn't related to him. They weren't in the same nation. They weren't from the same genealogy. But he was peaceful to him. And as a result of not destroying his enemy when he had the opportunity, listen to this lesson, brethren. He didn't destroy him when he had the opportunity. God was angry at him. And God was going to punish him for that. And because of the punishment that he could anticipate, the last verse of chapter 20 says, "The king of Israel went to his house heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria," that's the capital city. But you know, Ahab, if he had been a very efficient and effective and aggressive one interested in Israel's welfare, he would have defeated Ben-Hadad and crushed him. But he didn't do it. He missed his opportunity, didn't he? Sometimes we may be wrong to be too lenient on those that are opposed to the truth. Now, I don't think we ought to go out and beat them up or anything like that. But we need to keep firing at them, and we need to use the sword of the Spirit and cut them down. and not give them an opportunity to rise again. At least that's what I think about it. And if you are right, you're going to think about it that way too. Now in chapter 21, let me begin this chapter by saying, you know, reputation is what people think of you. Character is what God knows you are. Now they could be the same and they could be different. Sometimes people have a bad reputation, but they have a good character. That was characteristic of our Lord. They looked on him as a wine bibber and a glutton and a blasphemer. Nobody had a better character than Jesus the Christ, but he had a bad reputation among some, didn't he? And sometimes people have a bad character and they try to build up a good reputation. I think that's what people who are looking for votes are always trying to do, isn't it? But sometimes people have a bad reputation because they've got a bad character. And that's the case with Ahab and Jezebel in chapter 21. Next door to Ahab's palace was a vineyard. It was owned by a man named Naboth. Ahab wanted it. Well, nothing wrong in that. He offered to buy it. Nothing wrong in that. And it seems like he was willing to make a fair price. Nothing wrong in that. But Naboth didn't want to sell. That was his inheritance. That had come down through his family. And he wanted to keep it. And there was nothing wrong in that. But now notice the reaction of Ahab to being refused. He went home. He lied down on his bed. He put his face to the wall. He wouldn't eat. You know what we call that today? He was pouting. Pouting. Now, you kids never do that, but you've heard of children that do. Sometimes children poke out their lip because they don't get their way. But when a grown person does it, supposedly grown, they may be grown in body, but they got a long way to go to be grown, don't they? Sometimes people don't get their way. They pout. Well, here comes Jezebel and say, hey, aren't you the king of Israel? You ought to get your own way, whatever you want. I'll get that vineyard for you. So here's what she did. She got the authority. She got the seal from Ahab, his seal. She could do what she wanted to. And she sent messengers to the leaders of the city where Naboth lived. And she told those leaders, now you proclaim a fast. And at that fast, you have some hired men to come in and accuse Naboth of blaspheming God and then take him out and kill him. Well, blasphemy of God was a capital punishment. That's no question about that. But I thought, what did Jezebel care about blaspheming God? She had done that all of her wicked life. She didn't care anything about God. She was using this. This shows how unscrupulous this female was. And there's some other unscrupulous people involved here too, because, you know, they got that letter. They accused Naboth. They killed Naboth. Why didn't somebody in that city rise up and say, whoa, this is wrong? But not a one of them would do it. They were real, sure enough, early day politicians playing up to the queen, weren't they? Whatever she wanted, that's the way they went, regardless of how wicked it was with what they were doing. And so when they killed Naboth, Jezebel comes to Ahab and says, okay, it's yours, take it. And he did. It wasn't quite as easy as he thought, because the Lord told Elijah, you go down there where Ahab is when he comes to that vineyard. And when Ahab got there, Elijah showed up. Now, Elijah is that great prophet of God. Ahab says, have you found me my enemy? And Elijah said, yeah, I found you all right. And I'm going to tell you, because of what you've done, listen to this. The dogs are going to lick the blood, your blood, at the same place that you killed Naboth. And your family will be wiped out like the family of Jeroboam. You remember about the family of Jeroboam? How that every one of his family were killed. None of them even given a decent burial. They were eaten up by the wild beast. Isn't that a legacy? Isn't that a sad situation? But that's what happened to them. And he said, now Ahab, that's what's going to happen to you. Well, this really got to Ahab. Now, this is one of the moments of bright spot about Ahab, and they're few and far between. But you can see already, can't you, how wicked Ahab and Jezebel were to do what they did to Naboth. But when Ahab was told what was going to happen because of what he had done, the scripture says he humbled himself. He put on sackcloth and ashes. He gave every indication that he repented. He fasted. He lay in sackcloth. He wasn't pouting. He was going about softly. He just didn't act very kingly at all. He was really brought low because of what was going to happen. Well, the Lord told the prophet, well, now you go tell Ahab, this is going to happen, but it won't happen in your lifetime. It'll take place in the reign of your son. What a gift to his son. But that's the way it's going to take place. And he said, I won't bring evil in his days, the last verse of the chapter 21. But in his son's day, I will bring the evil upon his house. Well, in chapter 22, we're introduced to this man named Jehoshaphat. Now, if you look on your king chart, you'll see that after Rehoboam and Abijam and Asa, there's the king Jehoshaphat. We haven't read yet and studied yet about Jehoshaphat becoming king. We're studying about Ahab. But the reason we have to study here and include Jehoshaphat, because there was an event that took place between or with Jehoshaphat and Ahab, that when you study Ahab, you have to include it, don't you? So we're going to talk about Jehoshaphat here. And what the king of Israel, what was Ahab, he said, now, over here, you know that in Ramoth in Gilead is ours. There's some territory over here. It really belongs to us. And the king of Syria has taken it. And we need to go and get it back. And so he asked Jehoshaphat, will you go with me? You going to be my ally in this battle? It's a justified thing. We need to take back this property that belongs to us. And Jehoshaphat says, okay, I'm with you all the way. Jehoshaphat, we'll find out, generally considered to be a good king, but he sure did make a bad blunder this time, and it nearly cost him his life. But he said, I'll go with you. And so he comes up to Ahab, and Ahab has all these prophets to tell him how it's going to come out. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to be victorious. You're just going to be great. Everything's going your way. Jehoshaphat, he listened to all those false prophets. He said, Ahab, don't you have a prophet of God around here somewhere? Of course, Elijah, he wasn't here at this particular time. Ahab said, yeah, we got one, but I don't like him. Well, why don't you like him? He never says anything good about me. So he didn't like him. You see, Ahab didn't care about what was the truth. He wanted somebody to flatter him. And all of these false prophets, they were feeding him all of this goop that he was lapping up, and he was enjoying it. But Jehoshaphat also he's saying, don't talk like that. Get him and let's see what he has to say. At this time, there was a false prophet named Zedekiah. Zedekiah put on some horns of oil or iron, and he was going around and said, Ahab, this is the way you're going to drive those Syrians around. And they were really building it up in a big way. But they sent after this prophet. His name is Micaiah. Now, we don't know who the messenger was that went after him, but the messenger came to him and said, now, Micaiah, they're going into battle. And all the prophets have said they're going to win. Don't go in there and mess it up. Don't go in there and say something bad to discourage them. And Micaiah said, what the Lord tells me, that's what I'm going to say. Isn't that the kind of people that you like? Isn't that the kind of people we ought to be? The Lord has spoken. Folks, the Lord has spoken in our religious world. It matters not what all the false religions, denominations, and false prophets and reverend clergymen might have to say. It's what the Lord has to say. That's what we're supposed to say. And you young people remember that if you live to be 100 years old. Always depend upon what the Lord has to say. So they brought Micaiah in. And Micaiah, he plays with Ahab at first. Ahab says, well, what about it? Oh, you're going to do fine. And Ahab knew good and well Micaiah wasn't telling him the truth. He said, so I've told you to tell me the truth. He said, all right, I will. Your people are going to be like sheep without a shepherd. They best turn around and go back home and not follow you in this expedition. And about that time, Zedekiah came up to him and slapped him. Zedekiah, I guess, had the idea that if I can slap him, maybe his prophecy won't be true. You know, it's just amazing how many people think that they can oppose the messenger of God's word, and if they can oppose him severely enough, that's going to change God's message. No, it's not. I don't care what they did to Micaiah. God's message was, Ahab, you're going down on this thing. You're not going to be victorious. And when Zedekiah slapped him, Micaiah said, you'll see. You'll find out. Ahab said, take this man back to prison. I'll take care of him when I get back. And I like how Micaiah responded. He said, if you get back, I'm not a prophet of God. He knew good and well he wasn't going to get back. But now Ahab thought he had figured out a way that he could hide himself. He could disguise himself. And he put on the disguise of just being a regular soldier. He didn't ride in the king's chariot. Jehoshaphat did. Before they went into battle, the king of Syria told his soldiers, now get Ahab, the king of Israel. He's the one we want. He is our real enemy. He's the very same one Ahab had said, he's my brother. He's our real enemy. We want to get him. And so when they saw Jehoshaphat in the king's chariot, the soldiers of Syria thought that was the king they needed to get. Now Jehoshaphat says, whoa, I'm not the one you want. I'm not the one. You see, his decision to go with Ahab like to got him killed, didn't he? He made a stupid decision on that occasion. But nonetheless, Ahab looked like was going to be able to disguise himself and get away. There's a poem that was written by Longfellow. And one line in one of those poems says, I shot an arrow into the air, it fell to earth, I knew not where. Well, I'm going to take off on that just a little bit. And there was a soldier in Syria's army. He shot an arrow into the air, and well, it fell, I know where. It whopped Ahab right in the chest. He thought he could hide from God. Wasn't that lucky that that soldier happened to hit? He wasn't aiming at anything particularly. Wasn't that good luck? Good luck, my foot. That was God's providence. That was it. Ahab could not defeat God. He couldn't hide from God. He wasn't going to be successful in this battle. And they drove Ahab. He fell in his chariot. He drove his chariot and drove it to where he died. They washed out his chariot with his blood, and the dogs licked his blood at the very spot Elijah said they were going to lick it. Folks, you're not going to beat God. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. You're not going to deceive him. You're not going to defeat him. You're not going to overcome him. His will prevail with you and with me, just as it did with Ahab. You see, this is an interesting occasion of how this man was so foolish, but there's some lessons here for me and you to learn, are there not? Well, in verse 40 of chapter 22, it says, Ahab slept with his fathers, and Ahaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. All right, now I have suggested to you, you can do what you want to, at certain verses you want to put an N-I over them because it begins to talk about northern Israel, and at certain verses you put a J because it's going to talk about things in Judah. Right here over verse 41, you ought to put a J, because we're going to shift from Ahab a little bit and go over to southern Judah. Now, we've talked about Jehoshaphat being an ally with Ahab, but here is where we read about Jehoshaphat becoming king. And the Bible says in verse 43, and he walked in all the ways of Asa his father. He turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. Oh, that's a breath of fresh air. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for the people offered and burnt incense yet in the high places. Some of these kings, they did pretty well, but they didn't go far enough. They didn't destroy the seeds of idolatry. They left their church buildings standing, and first time they had a chance, why, they got right back into idolatry. But you notice he walked in the ways of Asa, his father. He did that which was right in the sight of God. And he says in verse 46, the remnant of the Sodomites, which remained in the days of his father Asa, he took out of the land. Oh, I wish Jehoshaphat and Asa could come visit us a little while. But nonetheless, verse 46, that's what he did. And he was making a good spiritual revival among the people. Now notice, we read here that Ahaziah, and that's the man that takes Ahab's place on the throne in northern Israel, he proposes something to Jehoshaphat. It was similar to what Ahab had proposed when they went into battle, and Jehoshaphat almost got killed, and Ahab did. He said, let your men and my men go together in the ships and so forth, in the commerce and in the trade and in the battles. And Jehoshaphat said no. I think he figured, I have enough for you guys. I don't want to be an ally with you people anymore. And so he didn't. Now, Jehoshaphat died. That's said of all of them, isn't it? In verse 50, a man named Jehoram, his son, reigned in his stead. Look on your chart for a moment, folks. You got to watch this chart now. I'm getting ready to really work on this chart. after Jehoshaphat, his son Jehoram becomes king in southern Judah. Now the last few verses of the 22nd chapter tells us about Ahaziah. And Ahaziah did evil in the sight of the Lord. He walked in the way of his father, that would be Abraham, and in the way of his mother, that would be Jezebel, and the way of Jeroboam. He served Baal, verse 53, provoked the Lord to anger, according to all that his father had done. Now I want to shift here just a little bit. Get your king chart, folks. We're going to study a little bit later on what happened. But let us first learn some of the relationship of who is involved in what happens. Look over here under the kings of Israel. Ahab, he had a son named Ahaziah. Ahaziah becomes the king, doesn't he? He doesn't reign very long. He falls through a lattice and dies. And his brother, Jehoram, becomes the king. So Ahab has two boys, two sons, that become king in northern Israel. First, Ahaziah. And the reason Jehoram became the king, because Ahaziah didn't have any heir to the throne. He didn't have a son to follow up with him. So his brother, Jehoram, is the next king. Ahaziah and Jehoram, they are the sons of Ahab and Jezebel. Go with me now over to southern Judah, folks. You see Jehoshaphat? He had a son, and his name was Jehoram. You got two Jehorams here now. In fact, you got two Jehorams you'll see right across one from another. Two men, same name, and each one of them was a king, but in different nations. Now, I told you, if you don't watch, you're going to get confused and messed up. If you don't, you're not normal. Jehoram is the king in southern Judah. Jehoram, Ahab's son, is the king in northern Israel. Have you got the distinction now? All right. But now look at northern Israel. Ahaziah and Jehoram were not the only children that Ahab and Jezebel had. They had a daughter. Her name, Athaliah. Look over here under the kings of southern Judah, folks. You see, after Jehoshaphat, there is Joram. Joram has a son that takes his place, whose name is Ahaziah, the same name it was over here a little while ago. He has a son named Ahaziah, and there's the name of Athaliah. Athaliah is no he. That's a she. That's the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. What's she doing ruling over here in southern Judah? Well, we're going to find out how it happened. She is a witch if there ever was one. She makes her mama almost look good. She's so bad. Now, if you look and see, you've got Ahab, Ahaziah, and Joram in northern Israel. In southern Judah, you've got Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah. Just the reverse of the names, but in northern Israel they're brothers, but in southern Judah they're father and son. Ahaziah in southern Judah is the son of Jehoram and Athaliah. Got that now? Ahaziah, that follows his father Jehoram. Athaliah is his mother. And that becomes very significant when we get over here in northern Israel and come to this fella called Jehu. Jehu, he is a buster. There's no question about it. He is probably one of the most aggressive people you can find anywhere in the pages of the Old Testament. He even makes Samson look like an amateur, the way he goes about what he does. I'll just give you a little quick preview. Jehu kills Jehoram in northern Israel. Jehu kills Ahaziah in southern Judah. Jehu finally gets and kills Jezebel. Boy, she needed it long before she got it, but she finally got it. And not only that, he kills a bunch of prophets of Baal, which looks like is going to be a pretty good king. Look at Jehu. How many kings after Jehu before you come to a line? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 men in the family of Jehu that serve as king, more than any other family. Because after Jehoram in the northern Israel side, you see there's a line. Jehoram and Jehu, not the same family. Jehu takes over right through there. And when he takes over, and Ahaziah in southern Judah is dead, that's when Mama Athaliah steps in and said, all right, I'm going to run things. And she does. Not only run them, she ruined them. And she killed off everybody that could possibly be an heir to the throne so she could rule. Except one got away. We'll find out how he got away. I'll tell you, these kinfolks in here, they don't like one another. Athaliah killed children, killed grandchildren, killed anybody that stood in her way to get to be king, get to be, queen, get to be boss. And so we see that these people, their relationship here is most interesting, how it takes place. This is a real stormy period in the divided kingdom, folks. It'll smooth out here in a little bit when we get to Jehu. You remember about Jehu? Remember Elijah when he was so discouraged? And God came to him and he put him to work. He said, I want you to go anoint Hazael to be the king of Syria. I want you to anoint Jehu to eventually become a king in northern Israel. It was at the same time he said, I want you to get Elisha to be your successor as a prophet. But now we're going to see Jehu come up on the scene. As we go into 2 Kings, and our time is up for tonight, we'll read about Ahaziah of northern Israel and how he fell through a lattice and how he tried to find out how he was going to get along, and Elijah really messes him up. And then after that, we sort of come off of the kings a little bit, and we're going to talk about 2 of the greatest people of the Old Testament, prophets, Elijah and Elisha. About 6, 8, 9 chapters about these prophets before we get back into the kings.